Question for TikTok about wage theft. You don't have to know what it is at all.
Okay, what's that?
Wage theft.
Okay.
Do you know what wage theft is? Or if you like had to guess, what would you guess?
Wage theft.
Yeah.
I don't know if your employer not paying you what you deserve or taking some money of your salary somehow, sneaking, like we heard years ago in Philadelphia when you paid at the restaurants, you pay the tip for
Mhm.
the waiters, the
Mhm.
owners would not they pass the money to them.
That's a good example.
Right.
Yeah.
So that's what I can think of.
Yeah, so I mean, it's kind of in the name theft. So they're taking money for you. So, like, let's say, you're my boss. We agree that you're going to pay me $10 an hour. I'm going to work 10 hours a week. You're going to pay me every 2 weeks, right? And then payday comes around, and either the check is short, and it's not like, you deducted taxes and it's short because of that. It's just short, right? Or it doesn't arrive at all, or like you said, like in a restaurant, there's the tips, right? So some restaurants share tips equally. It's not what you give me is what I take home, but there's rules as to who can take a portion of those tips. So beyond just the servers, you've got bartenders, you've got kitchen staff, managers, whatever. Well, managers and owners and sometimes kitchen staff, depending upon the state, they can't be in the tip pool. They can't take a share, but sometimes they will, right? And that's illegal. So it looks like various things depending upon the state, but it's pretty systemic. My name's Catherine. I was a victim of wage theft last summer at a restaurant here in Philadelphia. And I had to expose the owner of the restaurant on TikTok in order to get myself and my coworkers paid, because we had missed 2 checks in a row and we had no timeline of when we were going to get our money. And this was the majority of folks. This was their main livelihood, right? So, I was at a loss as to what to do. And it's a civil offense here in the United States, in most cities, states, and federally.
So you went to TikTok,
Yeah.
but how effective was that? And are there other ways to try to deal with it too?
Yeah, so it was pretty effective. I posted on Monday. The owner texted me on Tuesday and said that he had my money. It got a fair amount of views. Not Don't get me wrong, it didn't get like millions of views, but it got a lot of views. Like locally, it got like 60,000 views in 48 hours, which is like I had never posted anything to TikTok ever before, so I thought it might get like one view. I really wasn't sure. And then later that week, he paid the rest of the folks at the restaurant what they were owed. But it's hard to fight wage theft. I mean, I am an advocate for trying to fight it because, when you don't fight it, you're just telling that person that they can take advantage of you and you're not going to do anything about it. But it's a civil offense, so you have to report it to the Department of Labor.
Do you know
And
if locally in Philadelphia, if there's any city agency or courts that deal with that? There's a small claims court, but I don't know whether the small claims court would handle things like wage theft.
So there's a city Department of Labor. It's newer. It was launched in about 2019. The hard part is just that wage theft is so systemic that they have more claims than what they can possibly investigate. So during this time, I actually did report it to the city, the state, and the U.S. Federal Department of Labor. It has to meet certain qualifications for you to be able to report it federally. Like they have to have so many like employees and certain amount of like gross revenue, whatever. But I was kind of like, I'm just going to report it everywhere and see like who gets back to me first. Unfortunately, I didn't hear from the city until months later. I had partnered with a restaurant worker advocacy organization called Rock United, and they have their own, connections, and they reached out on my behalf. I heard from the state in September, and this happened in July. And the investigator called me and was like, yeah, I'm just checking to make sure you got paid. And I said, yeah, I did get paid. However, this is still going on. Like, he's still committing wage theft against my location, and he owned 3 other restaurants as well. That was one thing that I found out when I posted on TikTok. I had a lot of current and former employees message me and say, like, I'm so glad you're exposing him on TikTok. Like, I went through so much BS with him. Like, he has done this before, etc. And so, yeah, so I told the state, I was like, this is still going on. And they were kind of like, well, there's not much we can do. Like, whoever's experiencing wage theft is just going to have to report it. And I'm like, well, nobody's really enticed to report it if it takes you guys 2 months to actually follow up. But this is their livelihood, and they, in the meantime, they have to figure out how they're going to pay rent and buy groceries. You know what I mean? But I still recommend folks report it, because it does go on a record, and new laws can be passed every day. There's a lot in a city in California where if employers get, like, a restaurant gets a wage theft complaint, and they investigate and find him that they did commit wage theft, they'll pull their food license, so they can't actually operate. And that's a double-edged sword, because it does then put people out of work, right? But it does entice somebody to no longer commit wage theft.
One thing that I've heard also happens sometimes is that restaurant owners, but also other business owners, don't always pay Social Security taxes, even though they collect them. And so they have withdrawn Social Security from your paycheck, but they haven't necessarily passed it on to the government, and you don't have credit for those months that you've worked there.
Yeah, that is exactly true. So again, in my situation, I never got a pay stub, so I had no idea if my employer was paying taxes on my behalf or not. Now, I was getting every dollar, like, there was no tax deduction, so I was kind of like, well, he's probably not paying taxes, since, like, I take all the hours that I've worked and, multiply it by my hourly rate and add in tips, and it's equal, right? But I do know that one thing that he had done in the past to multiple employees was he would have managers who are full-time salary and get health care. He would cancel their health care, not give them any notice that he'd canceled their health care, but still be taking their healthcare premium from their check. But I do know, like, during COVID, many of his employees tried to file for unemployment, but because he hasn't been paying his taxes, they couldn't qualify for unemployment. And so they were sort of, really up a creek without a paddle, no resources to fall back on when they're, the whole restaurant industry is shut down. So wage theft looks like a variety of things, and the whole point of the TikTok is to just educate folks more on wage theft, both citizens who maybe aren't may never incur wage theft, but just so that you're more aware of, like, what resources are out there. Maybe you're a business owner, like, whatever, who knows, like, a lot of people don't know what it is, and I didn't really know what it was until it happened to me. I had been in a fortunate scenario where I'd always had upstanding employers who paid me, and I had never really occurred to me that I might have a boss that doesn't pay me, or is, like, actively trying to swindle me. So yeah, and so
this is also an issue sometimes for agricultural workers.
Yeah,
Who, especially people who are migrant workers and perhaps not documented, and therefore their employers feel like, oh, they can't complain. And
immigrant workers too. We've seen cases and heard people that they work, they contract to pay a certain amount, and in the end they paid no half of it. They said, well, go complain to the authorities, because they knew illegally, and they could.
Yeah, so one thing I'll tell you is that the Department of Labor doesn't care about your immigration status. So if you're undocumented, or you're just concerned about being an immigrant overall, the Department of Labor is not ICE, and so they don't care whether you're documented or not. They just care that you guys entered a contract, right, verbally or written down or whatever, to be employed and work for an hourly rate, and this employer is choosing not to do that, right? So you can report it to the Department of Labor if you are not documented.
All right. Well, good luck. And,
Thank you.
This stopped happening since we learned about it a few years back. We decided every time we go out to a restaurant, always leave our tip in cash.
Yeah,
Never left on credit card again
yeah, yeah.
because of that.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely a safer way to tip for sure. I mean, there are still ways to steal from folks, but you can only do what you can do, right?
Sure.
And so tipping in cash is a great way to go about it.
All
So
right, well, good
thank
luck.
you, I appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Take care.